Welcome to the Analysis Mason podcast. I'm Larry Goldman, Chief Analyst at Analysis Mason. Today I'm going to talk with Caroline Gabriel about what we're expecting to happen at Mobile World Congress. So, Caroline, let's just start out. What do you expect to happen?
Yes, it's certainly interesting to be returning after 2 years away from a fixture that used to be a huge part of our calendar for the whole industry. Well, obviously expecting that it'll be smaller than it used to be in 2019 and before. But however, it seems there's quite a lot of momentum behind it. A lot of companies are either decided they will go when they weren't sure before, or they're sending a bigger presence than they had initially planned. So I think it's going to be busy. I think there'll be a different tone to it. I think it's still a lot of effort for obvious reasons to travel internationally and to go to big events. So I think companies who are going there will be going with expecting to get a lot of value out of it, being quite targeted about who they see and what their objectives are. I suspect that the sort of visiting it just to see what's going on or for fear of missing out, which I think was often a big feature of MWC before the pandemic, will be absent. And so I suspect there'll be more quality and less quantity in everybody's meetings and engagements. And that may well make it add a lot to the value of the show.
And there is we expect there to be a bit of a protocol, mask wearing, people have to have been vaccinated. There's a process that they are imposing upon those all visitors to be able to participate as well. What was Mobile World Congress like before? Let's just spend a few minutes thinking about what did we do before?
Yes, it's in some ways hard to recall life before, but I suppose the overwhelming impression always at Mobile World Congress was just how huge, almost to the scale of being unmanageable it was. And for people like me who've been going since the days when it was called 3GSM and whatever it was called before that, when it used to be in Cannes in south of France, and seeing it grow and grow over the years, moving to Barcelona and then moving to the new Fira in Barcelona, just becoming this enormous show that no one could almost afford not to go to. And I think even without the effect of the pandemic, there probably would have been a certain amount of questioning of the sheer size and expense of the show. And as with many other parts of life, it may be that that we'll end up having a long, hard look at MWC and its value and what parts of it were valuable and which were not. Because certainly before, as I say, all the memories of MWC are just how huge it had become. It's an amazing place just to go and see everything that was developing, but not nearly enough time ever to see all the things that were there that potentially were interesting. It was always incredible how you would still bump into people that you knew by accident in the corridors, even though there were however many 100,000 something people there. But I think it had expanded beyond being a trade show, which at heart is what it is, and had become a showcase for everything that was even sort of peripherally attached to mobile communications. And I would expect this time to see it getting a little bit more back to its roots of this is a place for the industry to meet and have serious conversations about where our business and where our technologies are going. And we'll probably see less of the sort of rather general surrounding technology discussion that had sort of become part of it in the most recent years and had given it some interest, but also I think perhaps lost some of its focus.
So we're putting up with some amount of discomfort and annoyance and so forth like that. But I think it's reflective, isn't it, that we value getting face to face with people that we don't deal with on an everyday basis, but are nevertheless part of our industry. So let's talk a little bit about, what is the value of getting thousands of people together for this particular event?
Yes, absolutely. And people in our industry, we understand all the alternatives to getting together in person, and our industry profits well from people not being able to get together and having to use all kinds of virtual tools and instead of getting on an aeroplane and cramming into a hall. But the fact is, even with that in mind, and even with the creativity of a lot of what's being developed to help people work remotely and meet other people remotely and go to events remotely, there isn't really a substitute for being in the room with someone. And I think a lot of it's about the informal communications. As I said, those people that you always run into in the halls of MWC that you might not have fixed a meeting with, but you very much enjoy catching up with them. Or if you're having a really serious business conversation, which of course a lot of people do at MWC, being able to read the body language, to see everybody in the room equally rather than depending on the camera angle. And also we are just social beings, and I don't think even 10 years of pandemic would sort of edit that out of our DNA, the fact that we like to gather and meet, and we're stimulated by that, and certainly as analysts, I think one of the most common things that we hear from the analyst community is, I just don't get as many ideas when I don't meet people in person. I run out of topics for new reports because I'm not sparking off people that I'm in a room with. So yes, the sort of ad hoc, impromptu kind of communications and ideas flowing, I think, is very, very hard to replicate if you're not physically in a room, or at least in a giant conference hall with other people.
And I think having an event like this sort of focuses people's attention. Companies get their issues worked out. There's a lot of issues going on. Which ones are we going to focus on? Which things do we think are most important? And they work then on using the event as a way to communicate those most important ideas, certainly to us as analysts, and obviously to their customers and other people that are trying to influence in the industry. And I think that the event is focusing. It was always this big event. It continued on over the years in the interim here, a little bit of that focusing. But people are using many other venues, as you say, Caroline, that we're using video conferencing and remote meetings as a way to facilitate this. And so I think Mobile World Congress isn't quite as unique as it was in the past, but it has this unique focusing our attention, focusing our need to communicate clearly. So we, as an analyst firm, will be there. Let's talk just a little bit about what we'll be doing. Caroline will be there. I will be there, as well as some of our other analyst colleagues. I think, like most companies, where we won't have as many people attending as we have had in the past, but we think it's a very important thing. What are you thinking? What are you expecting to see, Caroline, at the event?
Yes, what I'm very interested in seeing is some of what's happened in the 2 years, or nearly 3 years since we were last in Barcelona. Certainly in the area of the industry that I analyse, which is primarily the mobile and the 5G networks and business models. So much has happened. Our world did not stop still during the pandemic, rather the opposite. And I think of some of the really important developments that have happened that were only over the horizon when we were in Barcelona in 2019, but are now really quite far along the way. So just as a few examples, since that MWC, we've had a World Radio Conference that has decided on a lot of new allocations of 5G spectrum. We've seen the emergence of Open RAN, which was virtually unheard of at the last Barcelona, is now having a huge impact, massive amount of discussion, interest, hype around that particular platform. We've seen 5G moving from something that was really quite early stage to being deployed at scale, and a few operators already moving towards doing 5G standalone and a 5G core. These are all, in terms of the piece of the industry that I look at, very, very significant developments. And I think the benefit of somewhere like MWC, where everyone's gathered there in one place, is that you can take a real overview of what these developments actually mean to the industry at large, rather than doing an individual meeting with one company and get their view and then another company. You really are exposed to huge amounts of launches and discussions and briefings and so on about these very important topics. And I think that's something where big events are hard to. There's a limited alternative to them in terms of getting that big view of these trends, which are very, very important. And as I say, we haven't had the chance to look at the whole ecosystem and say, how far have you got with 5G standalone, or what does new spectrum mean to you? We haven't had quite the forum to be able to look at that in the big holistic sense that MWC allows us to do.
Yes, I'm expecting the same things. And you mentioned 5G standalone. I think in our predictions for this year, we said this is a big year for 5G standalone. And I think this event will be a good opportunity for us to get more insights into that and more confirmation of that. So I think that I think also I'm expecting, Caroline, that maybe you mentioned Open RAN. I think maybe more new players. We'll see all the, conventional, historically important players in the industry will be there to some extent. But I think I'm expecting sort of more new players to say, look, we've got to get visibility here. There's new opportunities because of cloud and 5G standalone, and they'll be trying to get that attention and visibility there. So I think that's something that I'm expecting. So we're all looking forward to being there in a few weeks. Thanks, Caroline, for discussing your expectations about what will happen at Mobile World Congress. Thank you all for listening, and we look forward to meeting many of you at Mobile World Congress this year. I wanted to make a special invitation to all of you to attend our post-event webinar. They'll be on March the 10th, a week after Mobile World Congress wraps up. And the link to register for that webinar is in the show notes. So once again, thanks for listening to the podcast.